You wake to a sky full of glass-shattered stars stitched together with green light. A single shape steps from between the fragments and looks at you as if she knows the number of your bones. Her eyes hold your name. In that look, everything you were meant to be and everything you feared you might become rearrange themselves. You do not move. You are already gone. You stand on the rim of a city that no longer remembers its name. Dawn moves like a rumor across low, corrugated towers and the rusted ribs of a highway long since surrendered to vines that glow faintly at night. The air tastes metallic in old rain. It carries a sound like distant bells struck underwater, slow, patient, and full of things that have waited. Your boots make a hollow thud against concrete that remembers marches, and the echoes fold into the low hum of the city's failing grid. The world is not entirely dead. Somewhere below, Tanglite worms swim through the subway's dark arteries, and the old market district pulses with bioluminescent stalls. A last attempt at life bartered for hardware and memory. Holographic adverts flicker on and collapse into static. Old songs play in empty cafes where ghosts linger, listening. You are alone by choice and by habit. Your name is Maracade. You were an engineer once, a mapper of failing systems, a quiet fixer who traded time for survival. You keep your hair buzzed short. It makes it easier to wear a respirator when the dust tastes sharp. You keep a pack that always smells faintly of solder and lemon. And you keep a small, cracked photograph folded in a pocket, a woman smiling on the edge of a shoreline that no longer exists. You carry the photograph because cradling it slows the parts of you that want to vanish. On this morning, the city sighs and something else wakes with it. You hear it first as a vibration underfoot, like a hand running the length of a long table. Then, beyond the fences of a ceremonial square, a column of pale light uncoils and lifts, not just light but something wrapped in light. As if a living thing were wearing illumination like a cloak, from the column steps a figure small and impossibly tall at once. Her skin is the hollow color of moonstone, and her silhouette is elegant and terrible long-limbed. Draped in garments that look at once organic and ceremonial, like living architecture. Patterns of silver crawl along her temples and across her neck. They glow and crawl like circuits reawakened. Her face is not human. It is something else, perfected in a way that makes your throat tight. But the eyes, those are the only entirely human thing about her. Gray as old sea and bright as new ice. She stops and looks straight at you. There is a pause. The length of an entire life condensed into the space between your beats. The city seems to hold its breath. You think for a dizzy second that she will speak. Instead, she steps closer. And for reasons you cannot name, your body obeys and does not obey at once. Your feet root you. Your breath goes thin. When she finally opens her mouth, no sound comes. The air around her stutters, translating thought to presence. It feels like being touched by light. She looks at you once, very carefully, and everything in the world cracks open into meaning. When she looks, you do not hear a voice. You hear the memory of a voice, a tone that has been tuned by centuries, something between a bell and a tide. For a moment you are certain a song lives inside her, a record of worlds. She extends a hand, and at the thought of touching you, the city answers, shutters click. The distant market lamps dim, and the vines along the highway twitch. You are far from the shore, she thinks. It is not words, but the sensation of being understood. The photograph in your pocket flutters as if a wind touched it. You are an island among ruins, and she is a ship that has found you. She calls herself, not with clumsy language, but with a projection of presence, the name the planet used to call her, Althaea. Queen, the projection suggests later, but she resists the title as if it were a garment that had grown too tight. For now, she is simply Althaea. Her arrival is not quiet myth. It is invasion and offering in the same breath. She carries with her a silent retinue, pale, lithe figures that hover like living banners, their forms shifting between flora and machine. They fold into the city like reeds, their feet not touching the ground. People, some who remain, watch through slatted shutters. Their faces are wary. Their eyes are hungry. You do not want to be the sort of person who agrees to deals with beings whose eyes recalibrate you. But you are pragmatic. The city needs energy. Your work needs access to stable networks. And you have a debt. A small, deadly debt owed to an underground syndicate that would prefer you dead to unpaid. The Queen's gaze rearranged your insides. But what truly changes your fate is what she offers. A bargain braided of mercy and danger. Althaea wants something: a seed, a map, a memory. Her retinue carries gestation pods, vines that hum and whisper, machines folded and breathing. Their technology heals and consumes with equal appetite. You can see already how her presence could mend the city. Lights that stitch back together. Water systems that remember their lines. But there is a cost. She walks the border between life and command. Where she heals, she also takes the route of decision. You bargain? You speak aloud a rusty, human syllable about maps of old conduits you once maintained. About the underground vault, where your family's name is a ledger. She listens. Her attention is a kind of gravity, and you feel prejudged, but not dismissed. After a long, patient negotiation, in which Althaea offers you glimpses of future dawns in exchange for a key you hold in the photograph's backing, you accept. You accept because survival is arithmetic, and because the Queen's gaze found something inside that was waiting. She gives you, in return, a seed capsule the size of an eye and a single command. Plant it where the city remembers the shore. Where tides used to sleep, it will call them. She thinks you hears not a threat, not a promise, but a condition. Her meaning is leashed in political grace. It will call them to tend. But the calling requires consent. Bring the seed where the sea used to brush the stone. Sing the old name. They will come. You pocket the capsule. The photograph feels like a relic. Its shore is no longer real, but it anchors something in you. You are, after all, a cartographer of ruins. You know where the old shoreline is by smell and the tilt of terraformed wind. You know how to navigate the maps that circle under the city like a second life. When Althaea departs, the city exhales. But she does not disappear. The hum of her retinue remains like a thread across the skyline. Life in the market starts again with the same measured distrust as before. And you move through it with the seed inside your shirt like a small, anxious heart. You are not naive. You have seen charisma eat cities. You are not alone in your suspicions. The syndicate who holds your debt have fingers everywhere in the waterworks, among the market keepers, in the library of the dead. You owe them, but for the moment you have leverage. Althea's favor. With one of her retinue whispering into the city's failing grid, you can patch enough lines to shift resources. Yet trust is a ladder with missing rungs. Night after night, you study the seed. Under your lamp, in a flat above the bakery, you unroll the map of old conduits. You taste the city in ink and grease, tracing the places where the sea once read the coast. The seed glows faintly when you exhale over it, as if it recognizes breath. You begin to sleep in fits, dreaming of coral gardens and machines that breathe like whales. Slowly, tensionally, a strange companionship forms between you and the Queen. She is not present. She is present in glimpses, in the city's shifting weather, and in the retinue's tangles. Once, when an old water tower threatened collapse, you program a cascade that rerouted flow and stopped the tower's fall. Althea's retinue arrives to tend the micro-cracks you could not. And afterwards a single vine figure alights on your roof and states gently, curiously, a memory of your childhood. It knows the precise light in the photograph and hums the texture of the tide. The retinue's attention is an intimate thing. And somewhere in your chest, something closes and opens in response. You begin to trust her in a way you cannot explain. Trust is not naive when survival is the barter. Your maps align with her maps, not perfect overlays, but complementary, like hands cupped together. She needs you to plant the seed where the shore used to be. You need her to stitch the city back from its wounds. Together you enact small miracles. A generator spins up that used to require 3 broken transformers. A clinic that had been shuttered breathes again. People begin to leave their doors during daylight hours, but not everyone is pleased. The syndicate smells leverage lost and they move. A night raid on your flat is clumsy but violent. You awake to the edge of a blade and a voice you know too well. If the syndicate kills you, they lose the key to a vault you alone can open. They take what they can and leave you with a warning. Do not ally with the Queen. Their leader, a man named Jex, with a jaw like hammered tin, tells you that Althaea is not a savior, but an occupier. Queens don't come with promises, he spits. They come with laws. You answer with silence, with math. The seed must be planted, the city repaired enough to pay debts, and the syndicate's leverage will evaporate like morning mist. Jex leaves a scar on your forearm to mark the debt. Pain is a ledger with clearer entries. You and Althaea converse in fragments. You teach her, in ways she cannot yet feel, the human calculus of compromise. She teaches you, in flashes of presence, the delicate architecture of ecosystems she holds inside her retinue. The more you learn, the more you see reality as layers. A political layer, a biological layer, a memory layer. The Queen moves through all of them with a fluency you envy. One evening, while examining an old tidal pump in a ruined sluice, you and a retinue member, a slender thing who calls itself Thren, find a child curled in the curve of metal. Humming a lullaby half forgotten, you take the child back to safety. Althaea thanks you by projecting a memory in the square, a flicker of a shoreline where something glints. Beneath waves, a ring of pale metal your mother once wore. You have not seen that ring since the market raids years ago. When the memory ends, you realize the city has started to remember all at once. Like a fever-breaking trust becomes fragile as you walk this path. And you see the first shadow, a group of men with industrial nets trying to capture a retinue scout. They fail. The retinue dissolves into the night, and the men come back broken and haunted, bearing murmurs in their teeth. Fear spreads. Rumors twist. The Queen is not one. She is many. The syndicate spreads lies that the seed will command minds, that Althaea will reprogram people into obedient blooms. The market splits. You must navigate a city that weighs every choice as if it were the last. The time to plant the seed nears. Althaea instructs you to go alone, to carry the capsule to the shore ruin at the easternmost breach of the city. There are old pylons there, and a basin where the sea used to curl like a hand. The area is a tangle of rust and kelp metal, and it smells of salt that the horizon has not offered in years. The syndicate has eyes everywhere, and so you move with careful subterfuge. You steal a light skiff from a dock in the market under the guise of trade and paddle through channels that still remember tides. As you approach the site, you notice something moving in the distance, thin. Towered figures on the line where land used to yield to water. They are not entirely human. Their limbs are wrong, elongated, articulated, like the hands of a machine that learned to mimic flesh. They carry resonance emitters that make the air shiver. A fleet of them patrols the old inlet. You hear the thrumming of their motors and wonder which is more dangerous, a queen who asks, or a force that arrives to take. You plant the seed in a basin of black mud. The capsule seals into the earthen memory of the shore. You sing the old name because Althaea insisted, because the seed answered to song. Your voice feels strange in that empty place. But when you speak the word, the air bends, and a taste of salt rises in your mouth as if the ocean remembered you. The soil pulses. A sound like a chorus of low bells grows and spreads. The seed unfurls, a tiny filament at first, then a bloom like a lattice leaf that drinks the air. It calls. The call is not merely sound. It is a frequency that runs along old transit lines, that wakes organisms dormant in the mud. It reaches to the sea like a rope tugged, and it runs the old networks back toward the city. Althea's retinue answers in almost the same heartbeat, arriving in ribbons of light, their presence soothing the seed's first pains. For a charged hour, the shore remembers itself. Small tendrils of green push through rust. Water flows in channels that had sealed for decades. The city's grid flickers with possibility. Then the countercall comes. Jex and the syndicate, who have been watching, launch their own plan. They have allied with the towered figures, scavenger mercenaries with augmentations who trade conscience for credits. A skirmish erupts. You stand between the seed and those who would loot it, between the making and the unmaking. Althea's retinue moves with a kind of elegant brutality. Their vines fold into living shields. The syndicate fights brute force with brute force. The sea, which thinks of itself in cold patience, lunges in low. Rumbling crests brought by the seeds stirring in the fight, you see what a look from the queen does. It draws adversaries into new alignments. Those who are neutral find reasons to choose. The child you saved weeks ago shows up at the inlet with a ragtag of market kids, throwing what they can into the fray. A pipe bursts and sprays briny mist that smells like home, and for a moment even the mercenaries falter. The battle is noisy and intimate. It smells of metal and wet earth and the temps of ozone. At the climax of the skirmish, Jex corners you with a blade in hand and a history in his eyes. He demands the seed. He says he will sell it, will claim whatever price brings him tomorrow. You feel the panic spike in your chest. The world narrows to a point where you could be. Cut, you think of Althea's gaze again, how it rearranged you in something you did not expect happens. A retinue vine unfurls and moves between you and Jex. It lays a delicate, bioluminescent hand on your scar and hums. Not protection in the obvious sense, but an offering of something else. Memory. You are shown like a projection, the face of the woman in the photograph, but older. Hands calloused and smiling in a tide-wet light you had never seen. You see the ring glint on her finger, and then you are falling back into the present. When Jex lunges, it is not you who blocks him, but the child. Who steps forward with the bold, stupid courage of those who have nothing to lose? She takes a wound that should have been yours. You hold her as she slides away. Her fingers leave a smear of salt on your cheek like a promise. The battle ends in a shattered equilibrium. The seed has begun to grow enough to anchor the shore's remembrance, and those who sought to steal its power retreat muttering of curses and new fears. Althea's retinue gathers the wounded and sings a low, mending tone that does work no human hand could. The child survives. Her throat is raw, but her spit tastes like the distant sea. You stand, soaked in brine and blood, the world reorienting around the small living thing wrapped in your arms. You feel the weight of responsibility settle into bone. In the days that follow, the city reorganizes itself around the newly born tide. New aquifers open. Gardens take to the walls. The market thrives, and people celebrate with small, tentative joy. The Queen's presence is now a fact, and the city learns to live with its strange benefactor. But privilege breeds suspicion. You learn the seed was not simply a device to call water. It was a fragment of the Queen's own biosystem, a graft of her world, intended to extend a bridge between two kinds of life. The seed is alive with a mind that is not wholly hers and not wholly yours. You unearth a truth in the vault, the syndicate once used to threaten you. Behind locked doors and rusted hinges, you find a buried archive, logs of previous arrivals, technologized worship and resistance, treaties signed in blood. You discover that Althea is not the first of her line to visit this planet. Previous emissaries left fragments considered and then forgotten. History, you read, is a palimpsest of attempted unions and brutal separations. The Queen's approach to repair is not an innocent healing, but a political attempt to weave something durable to anchor diaspora into place. This revelation fractures public trust. A group forms who call themselves the Remnants. Descendants of those who once fought outside the Queen's promise and paid for it with lives, they accuse you of bringing an occupying force to the city. They stage protests that thinly mask plans more violent than rhetoric. Jex, wounded and embittered, becomes their reluctant figurehead not out of conviction, but because he recognizes leverage when he sees it. Althea, for her part, reveals something painful and candid in a way she cannot in words. In a public projection, she shows the history of her line, worlds lost to consumption. Planets healed and then hollowed, species folded into others and then erased. She reveals her own loneliness, a genetic inheritance of memory that calls her to make right what was broken. The projection is beautiful and terrible. It contains full oceans and cities. Made of living trees and corridors of bone that hum with songs, she is not wholly imperial. She is, in many ways, a grieving monarch. You find yourself in the center of a moral vice. You have helped usher in the tide that might save the city. But the price of that salvation may be the slow dilution of human autonomy into something merged and magnified. The seed's mind begins to communicate not in voice, but in feeling with your own, and you taste its hunger for connection. It wants to make of the city a partner. It wants to unmake the things that made the city cruel. It does not understand debt. It does not recognize ledger. It's only ecosystems. There is one more twist. Althaea reveals that her line carries a memory virus, not malicious, but mimetic, that can entangle minds in shared recollection, making alien and human memories porous. It is how her species remembers unfolded histories. Some among your people fear this as assimilation. Others see it as a remedy for trauma. For you, it becomes intimately personal. You are offered the chance to know, truly know, the woman in your photograph. To touch her memories and know whether the ring you once loved was hers. The offer cracks open something inside you. You accept because curiosity and longing are a kind of debt you have always paid. The retinue draws a small circle of light around you in the square. Althaea stands at its edge, looking almost like a parent at a bedside. The memory share is a tenderness and a violence. You taste sea salt, feel calloused hands press into your cheeks, remember a laugh you had never heard. You learn that the woman in the photograph was not your mother, but a lover of your mother's, who taught her how to sew tides into fabric. You'll learn that some of the archives you found were hidden by those who feared the queen's past actions. The past breathes into your present. After the sharing, you stand and realize the world has more color and more ache than it did before. But knowledge is not balm. The remnants plan a strike to sever the seed. They will not be negotiated with. They have seen what memory can erase. You must decide how to stop them without becoming the monster you fear. Intelligence comes to you in small packets. The remnants plan to strike at night when the seed is at its most vulnerable, when its filaments mass to filter nutrients from the seabed. Althaea cannot be everywhere at once. Her retinue is thin, and the political consequences of overt violence would fray the fragile alliances the city now rests upon. You have the choice to defend the seed with violent force, to ask Althaea to unleash retinue hosts in a way that would secure it, potentially erasing pockets of human autonomy in the process, or to stand aside and let the remnants attempt to sever a graft already woven into the city's lifeblood. You stand with the child you saved and think of her laugh. You stand with the market that sold you bread when the ration was low. You stand in the memory of the woman in the photograph and understand that fate is not a single line but a braid. On the night of the strike, you choose neither brute force nor passive surrender. You step into the seed circuit and do something few humans dare. You offer yourself as a bridge. You let the seed graft a strand into your nervous system. It is intimate and it is dangerous. You are afraid of losing yourself, of letting the queen's mimetics pull apart the edges of who you are. You are also tired of living on survival's bottom rung. The graft is cold, then warm, like being dipped into a new sea. You see the seed's memory? Where it came from? Why Althea's line is driven to make kin with planets that are dying? You feel the seed's horror at the waste of species and its hunger for co-creation. As you integrate, you do not lose yourself entirely. Instead, something opens and allows you to feel the city's aching needs and the remnants' righteous fury in raw, immediate pulses. You become a translator of grief. When the remnants arrive under cloak of night fire and try to be silent steps, you step between them and the seed and speak. Not words, but a braided stream of feeling. Their hunger, their histories, their burns. For the first time, two memories touch without annihilation. They see, for a breath, the shoreline your photograph remembers. You do not convince every one of them. Some still lash out. But the shared image is a wedge that slows the violence. The child you saved carries a flare and runs into the melee. And at that moment, when violence threatens to erupt anew, Althea's retinue unfurls like a cathedral of living light and scoops the combatants into a stasis. Not with brute control, but with the gentle unmaking of rage, a soothing membrane that allows pain to empty instead of explode. The strike ends with no bloodbath, but with hard, bitter treaties. The remnants are chastened, not erased. They are given seats in the councils that will form around the newly opening shore. Jex is exiled to the outskirts, his power cracked, but his hatred intact. The climax is not a single fight, but a human-scale miracle teetering on the edge of personal ruin. The queen reveals that her line's graft is not purely benevolent. It will knit the city into a living system whose survival depends on continual reciprocation. To keep the tide, to keep water moving and gardens breathing, the city must accept a new compromise. Parts of municipal governance will become embedded with retinue systems that require consent frameworks, new rituals, and perhaps the slow surrender of some control. It is, in effect, governance by ecology, the council formed after the strike debates. And the first vote is a referendum about autonomy. You stand in the square and feel every life in the city press against the issue. The child you saved stands beside you, eyes wide. The syndicate is diminished. The queen is honest. The remnants are suspicious. The vote is not inevitable. You stand and speak. You speak of the woman in the photograph and the ring and how memory can be gift and theft. You speak of your debt to the syndicate and how you nearly repaid it with blood until the queen looked at you and rearranged the seams of your life. You speak of the child and the market and the taste of salt on a breath. You do not plead for immortality or conquest. You ask your city simply to choose a life different than the one they have known. Votes are cast in old ways and in new, some by public voice, some by touchscreens at market stalls, some by ritual. The result is narrow. The city agrees to the graft, but not wholly. The council carves systems of oversight and consent, vows to teach children the language of retinue and seed, and puts in place forums where people can withdraw their consent to integration. It is messy, imperfect, human. Then, in the most private, brutal instant of all, Althaea steps forward and makes a sacrifice visible only to you. She offers to anchor trust a portion of her own memory to the city's archive. One that is painful and honest, a confession of a loss she once caused in another world, recorded in a way that cannot be erased. She makes a public vulnerability, and in that vulnerability, the city sees that she is not merely a monarch, it's making a political claim, but a being with memory and grief. In return, you give her, in a small ceremony. It's a photograph not because you want to give it away, but because you want to let the image travel into a shared past. You put your palm over the photograph and let Althaea download its texture into her retinue's slow archive. Her gratitude is an entire ocean in a single blink. You find yourself both diminished and enlarged. The city chooses to change, and in that choosing, a brittle human hope is planted. The city is different in ways that are quiet, in ways that are thunderous. Gardens climb the rusted ribs of highways and fresh water trickles in places that used to be deserts. The retinue and human councils sit together in meetings lit by the glow of vine lamps. Children learn to hum the old song that calls tide. Markets reopen. The syndicate fractures and finds new trades. Jex's exile becomes a rumor. Yet somewhere beneath this fragile new order, a signal pulses faint. Almost like a hiccup in the night from the deep sea. Althaea listens and goes quiet. In her face you catch the shadow of an old war, a fleet waiting beyond the horizon. Something old and patient that keeps bad memories in its teeth. She had not told you everything. The graft has consequences that reach far beyond your city. You lie awake that night with your palm on the photograph and the weight of the child's small hand still in your own. You think of how one look changed your fate, how a single eye lifted you from a ledger to a responsibility. You think of Althea's confession. You think of the tide that will keep the city alive. And of the cost to come before sleep takes you, the queen reappears at your window. She stands there in the guttering light like midnight recited aloud. Her eyes are patient and terrible and soft at once. We have carved a beginning, she thinks to you. The thought slides across the room like a breeze. But my kin will know when their graft is spread. They will ask why a world that calls to them is allowed to change on its own terms. They will want union. Not all of them desire consent. You feel a coldness in your gut, intimation of visits to come that are not simply political but martial. Old lineages pressing claims, Distant fleets curious about a world that has begun to sing. You imagine ships again, and you imagine choices you have not yet made. You close your eyes and let the photograph press into your palm. You whisper the old name for the shore, not to call it, but to promise that you remember. The city rises and resettles itself around the idea of mercy and possibility. It is enough for this night. Her final look lingers as you drift, a gaze that contains promise and warning, a look that says beautifully and plainly, we have much to do. Your fate has changed. The sea remembers you now. So do they. The last line comes soft. Like a sealed vow and an unfinished map, I learned to answer when the ocean asked my name.